In the fullness of time, on a silent night, the eternal Word was made flesh, a child laid in a manger, yet born king, not just of Israel, not just of men, but of all creation, Lord over every star, every nation, every power, and every spirit. His inheritance was won through the victory of the cross. His kingdom spreads, not through death and destruction, but through salvation. And so we gather at Christmas, not merely to remember a story, but to proclaim a kingdom, the kingdom of the child who is Lord, the crucified who is risen, the Lamb who is also the Lion. This is Advent. This is Christmas. This is Fresh Ground Theology.
Well, welcome back to Fresh Ground Theology for our last Christmas episode. We're a few days past Christmas now, but we're still in the season of Advent tide. And I hope you had a good Christmas. How about you, David Ryan? How are you doing?
Yeah, it was good. Well, I mean, you basically had the same Christmas as me since
That's true.
we're all at our in-laws' house. I do always really like spending it with family, whether it's on my side or on Sarah's side of the family.
Yeah.
All of you. I thought it was pretty good. And we actually did end up having a mini Christmas with my parents when we went
Oh, yeah.
around Thanksgiving.
I did as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did a Chris Kindle Mart.
Okay.
Me and my dad do carvings, so I helped him run a booth up there. I do mail him a box of carvings every year for my contribution, so it was nice to be able to actually participate in one of these shows for the first time in like 9 years since I moved
Oh,
out of
man.
state.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
That's pretty. Sounds pretty fun. So yeah, actually we are recording a bit over the internet right now. So we're not having the same type of coffee in the same room. In fact, it's actually late at night and I am not drinking coffee.
Well, I
I'm
am.
drinking an herbal tea, which I like to grow some herbs and I forage a bunch. So in today's cup, I have some hyssop that I had in my garden and goldenrod, and it makes for an interesting cup of tea. It's supposed to open up the airways and I don't know,
Isn't
magic
that like the
stuff.
opposite of what Goldenrod Norfolk does to people?
Well, see that's a whole myth thing
Oh,
because
okay.
goldenrod blooms at the same time as ragweed.
I
And
gotcha.
ragweed is the culprit on that. But see, ragweed has green flowers and it's wind pollinated, whereas goldenrod is pollinated with bees and wasps and all sorts of fun stuff.
So is
And
it
so,
basically the goldenrod is the more visible
yep,
flowering thing, so everyone just assumes that's what it is and blames it?
yeah, but
Yeah.
goldenrod is perfectly harmless. In fact, it is good and it makes good tea and it's amazing for the environment. So, anyways,
Okay.
um,
Well,
it
I
helps a
learned
lot of
something
bees.
new today.
Yeah. So, but anyways, this one I'm drinking. What are you drinking, David?
I don't know if you remember that Sterling Roastery stuff,
Oh
that
yeah.
Ethiopian we tried a while ago.
Oh yeah.
I'm finishing up a bag of that right now. I did a pour over, and
Mm-hmm.
it is almost 9 o'clock while we're recording this, but I thought it was worth it to have a cup of
Yeah.
coffee
Well,
while recording this.
one of us has to make the sacrifice while we record this for
I'll
sure.
make the sacrifice.
Well, thank you, David. But yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and if I recall, I think you mentioned something about having made a pumpkin spice creamer. And I know you know this, but the audience may not know. I don't normally go for that sort of thing, but I do suspect that the homemade version probably tastes a bit better than, well, what you get outside of the home.
Um, so I usually through the year I'll try different versions of creamers and stuff, but there is a recipe that I enjoy for the Christmas holidays and pumpkin spice. I think really, as cliche as it really is, it is actually quite good, and I like it better when I make it myself.
Yeah.
Because I don't drink a lot of creamer, so I can actually use real cream and like real products in it, and not just synthetic waste that they scraped off the bottom of I don't know, a nuclear power plant or something.
Just getting in
Which
touch with your inner basic. Nate.
Yeah, inner basic Nate, white Nate. Yeah, he just needs his refill on his homemade pumpkin pie spice creamer. So yeah, I mean it's pretty what you might think, it's got pumpkin pie spice. You basically take heavy whipped cream or a little bit of heavy whole milk, some pumpkin puree, not pie filling, actual puree, brown sugar, pumpkin pie spice, or just, go into your spice cabinet and grab a bunch of cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, cloves, vanilla extract, little bit of salt in there, not too
Yeah.
much, but a little bit, just kind of like makes it all pop. And you just basically put it on the stove um, and turn on the heat. And I take my little whisk and I just stand there and it's not a big whisk, it's a little whisk, you know, and until it froths up, and then you can sieve it out, or you can just put it straight into your coffee, which is what I do. And I just make enough for the day. Like I said, I don't drink a lot of creamer, but every once in a while I'm in the mood for something a little more festive, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than 7, 8 bucks or whatever they pay you want these days. Um,
I'm lazy. If
so
I want something festive, I just go through the Starbucks drive-through.
yeah, it's usually what I do, but I live out in the country, so,
It's a bit
the
farther
nearest
for you.
Starbucks is at least 15 minutes away,
The nearest one
and
for me is like 5 or less.
yeah, so it's a bit of a drive. So I just do this, and, if you put some, oat milk in there, that's usually pretty good. I usually like a little bit of oat flavor in my if I'm not really like, I either like it, my coffee black and, like, so I can taste all those notes, or I
Yeah,
just want like a coffee-based drink that's just bursting with sugar and flavor and, like, all your additives. That's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, that's kind of one of my favorite things to do during the holidays is just experiment a little with a basic thing. And I'll actually hopefully I remember to put that recipe in the show notes. And if you're in the mood when this is released and you're feeling like, yeah, I think I'll tackle some homemade pumpkin spice creamer, it'll be there for you. So
that'll probably be the first official recipe released by Fresh Ground
there
Theology.
you go. Yeah, it'll be the
Appropriately,
first.
something for coffee.
There it is. Maybe I can sell some of these herbal tea forage stuff that I have eventually, but right now I don't forage enough for more than just me. But well, anyways, so that's our coffee conversation a bit for today. And today's conversation, as we get into it, is going to pull us into the life of a saint that most people, you've probably heard of, good King Wenceslas. Wenceslaus, I'm not sure exactly how
I think
you,
it's Wenceslas. I don't know.
Wenceslas.
Well, that's how I'm
Uh,
gonna pronounce it. If it's wrong,
Wenceslas.
forgive me.
Yeah, Laos sounds weird. You've probably read the words "good king" and then like Wenceslas. If you're like me and dyslexic, it kind of
Worcestershire
sucks.
sauce.
Worcestershire sauce, Worcestershire. Yeah, you've probably sung it. I mean, maybe you've sung it. You've probably heard da 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 that song. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I don't even know the words. I just kind of know it's about this really interesting named king. Um, but behind this hymn, there is an actual flesh and blood Christian ruler who was a good king, and his story is really worth telling. And David, you've been digging into him, and where do we begin with good King Wenceslas?
Yeah,
I've practiced that word.
yeah, most of us only hear his name, maybe once a year, and that carol. If by the time it pops up, you're not already tuning out the holiday music.
Mm,
But when you pull on that thread, you find yourself in the middle of, a rather remarkable story of faith and politics, betrayal, and charity. Vaclav or Wenceslas, I guess, is the Englishized version of it, which is a longer name, however that works. Anyways, was a Duke of Bohemia in the early 900s, and he lived in a time when Central Europe was unstable, pagan tribes pressing in, newly formed Germanic kingdoms to the west, the Magyars
mhm.
raiding from the east, and in the middle of that chaos, God raised up this young Christian ruler who lived more like a servant than a warlord, you know. Um,
That's wow. That's really interesting. I mean, like chaotic times, and a lot of desperation. You think a lot of people, and there were a lot of most people were not good, if you would, or at least they were, But that's a interesting kind of political context that he was in. What about his family? What about that? What was his family like?
yeah, so he was born into a ruling family, the Premelslid dynasty. I
Oh,
probably mispronounced that. His
if
father
there's any Bohemian, researchers, medieval Bohemia researchers, just let us know how to pronounce that and we'll correct ourselves.
will put out a statement. Um,
Yes.
anyway,
Yeah,
so
that's
his
right.
father, Bratislav, was
Uh-huh.
a duke, but his grandmother, Ludmila, is the one who
Mhm.
really shaped him. She is also venerated as a saint, and
Okay.
she converted to Christianity and pushed for the Christianization of Bohemia. And
Hmm.
she taught her grandson the scriptures, trained him in the rhythms of Christian worship, and planted in him the conviction that his role was to be under God's authority. The stories say he was so devout as a boy that he would rise early to pray and even cultivate wheat for the Eucharist bread with his own hands.
Oh, well.
Whether that's, an actual story or not, it does tell us how his contemporaries remembered him as a prince who wanted to serve God before serving himself.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I find it interesting on two notes. Like, on the one hand, like back in the day, the churches, the people in the church would bring the wheat and even ferment the grapes for the bread and the wine.
Yeah.
And you would do that, like, for your church. And I think that's, something that's kind of lost in a lot of, especially evangelical churches.
Yeah.
Just as a, side comment, like even Orthodox churches, a lot of them have people in the church to bake the sourdough bread and the recipe, and they have their own thing that they do with that, and they bring it in. Not so much the grapes anymore, but or the wine, but I don't know. I find that interesting that he made sure to do that himself.
Yeah.
Again, whether it's fact or symbolic,
Yeah,
don't
and
really
just the idea
know.
of participating in that
Right.
aspect of it really like, if I'm going through the effort of growing the wheat to
Yeah.
turn into the host um
Yeah.
that we would use in Eucharist, it just would add an extra weight onto it rather than just like, okay, for him it would be at mass getting the Eucharist.
Right.
Um but it's like, I helped make this thing that the priest has consecrated, it just gives a
Right.
nice gravity to it that
Yeah.
I do
it-
I think would be nice,
Yeah. It's
but
like
it's
I
not
put
really
a lot of
practical
time
now.
into that. Yeah, not many of us have acres enough to grow wheat for enough a year's worth of Eucharist bread. But anyways,
Yeah.
so I find that interesting that
Yeah.
they
Uh,
make note not and then also you know he didn't have to do any of that. Like
exactly.
he had plenty of peasants, I'm sure, around him in Bohemia to do the work. Instead, he goes out and if you've ever had a garden, I've tried to grow wheat myself, and I wasn't ever very good at it. Uh, eh, and y I have a garden, I enjoy my garden, and it is messy, dirty work, and, if I can see trying to avoid that kind of work, especially if you're the king and you don't have to. So I feel
Yeah, I
like
know,
that's
right?
like super striking because, at best, I picture a lot of medieval rulers as like trying to survive and like just hacking away at life. And on the best side, a lot of times I picture them as like power hungry warlords trying to build their
Yeah.
little empires and stuff.
Right.
So I find that just absolutely
It
fascinating.
it does definitely bring to mind, like, city states from back in the day.
Yeah, for sure, for
But
sure.
anyways, yeah, so Wenceslaus, you know, could have gone the way of being, power hungry ruler.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
but his rule was marked by compassion and piety. He built churches,
Mhm.
he supported priests, and above
Hmm.
all, he cared for the poor. Think of
Yeah.
the passage in Matthew 25 where Christ says, "As you did to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." That's the verse that definitely comes to mind when you read about Wenceslas feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and protecting the weak. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like the biblical ideal of kingship, like that's what it was supposed to be about. The shepherd king, almost like a vision in like Psalm 72, for example.
Yeah, Psalm 72, or yeah, paints a picture of a king who defends the cause of the poor, saves the needy and crushes the oppressor. Wenceslas, in his short reign, really lived into that. He wasn't perfect, but he oriented his rule around Christ's justice and mercy.
Mm.
His reign embodied, in Micah, do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. That's why as people remembered him as more than just a ruler, they remembered him as a saint.
Hmm. Yeah, but I know one of the things with saints is usually they're really good people, but they usually don't have really great lives, and usually they end up martyred in some ways. Uh,
Yeah,
is that what happens with him? Does it take a dark turn? I'm
um,
assuming that's the way it goes?
unfortunately for Wenceslas, it does. Um, his
Mm,
younger
yeah.
brother, Boleslav, he opposed the policies. Boleslav
Okay.
wanted a harder, more independent rule, less aligned with Christianity and less cooperative with the neighboring Germanic kingdoms. Some say it was political ambition, others say jealousy. Either way, he turned against Wenceslas. So
Oh,
basically, one
man.
morning, as Wenceslas was going to mass, Boleslav and his men ambushed him outside the church doors and killed him. So, like,
Oh,
he's literally on his way to mass, and then he gets murdered
I
right
just
outside the church.
sheath. Yeah, I just see, like, this stone church and snow on the ground or whatever. They I don't know if it was winter or what,
I think
and
that's
then
the
just
current Christmas season affecting your.
yeah, that's true, and then he's just wearing his cloaks and stuff, and people jump out and stab him, but, I mean, that's, like, straight up, like, biblical, be
Yeah.
betrayed like Judas or, like, David and I forget his advisor that turned on him, all that stuff.
Yeah,
That's
and I mean,
crazy.
you even hear echoes of like Cain and Abel,
Oh,
brother
yeah, that's
rising
true.
against brother. You
Yeah.
also can see Christ's story reflected here, betrayed by those closest to him, killed while
Yep.
seeking to worship the Father. For the church, Wenceslas's death wasn't just political murder, it was a martyrdom.
Mm,
I mean, even
mhm.
seeing like Revelation 2, be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. That's how his death was remembered.
Yeah, so yeah, okay, so yeah, so he died a martyr, testament, died outside the church or outside the doors of the church. Um, all that stuff, but correct me if I'm wrong. Here's my Protestantism showing just a little bit. So usually saints are good people. They have a usually tragic ending. Not always, but usually tragic ending.
Yeah.
But there usually is miracles involved somewhere,
Yeah.
right? Or,
So my
what?
understanding, saints to become a saint, there has to be at least like two miracles attributed
Oh
to
yeah,
them within the Catholicism. So yeah,
it's true.
his relics were moved to the Church of Saint Vitus in Prague, and almost
Okay.
immediately stories of of miracles began circulating. The
Hmm,
blind
yeah.
received sight, the sick were healed, and soldiers claimed protection through his intercession. Now,
Huh.
whether we as Protestants read those literally or not. What matters is that his contemporaries saw God's hand affirming his sanctity. Just like in Acts, where God did extraordinary miracles to Paul, these reports strengthened faith and anchored Wenceslas as a patron for his people.
I think that's. I think it's always really interesting. You start reading about these miracles and stuff, and
Yeah,
some of them I'm like, man, that sounds really legit. Some of them I'm like, that sounded like the last three. So sometimes, I think they literally happened, and God works in all sorts of ways. Like
yeah,
I have the ways that I'm comfortable with God working. but, sometimes God does stuff that I'm not comfortable with, you know? And, if he wants to do I if he's drawing people to himself through miracles, after a saint dies,
Yeah, it's
that's up
as
to
a
him.
yeah, and as a Protestant, the thought of, relics of a dead saint,
Yeah.
healing people, like, most Protestants are gonna be like, "I don't know about that," but it's like, okay, so let's look at what's going on. This person got healed, and the result of that is glory to God, so I can't say it's a bad thing that it happened because
Yeah.
it's pushing people to Christ,
Yeah,
so
yeah, as long as it's yeah. I mean, there's a couple times where I'm reading some of these lives of the saints, and it feels like the miracle is draw towards the worship of the saint himself, and it's just and I'm using the word worship intentionally there
yeah,
versus, veneration. And those ones, those are the miracles. They may be real, but I'm like, I don't know if the right spirit's behind that one. But most of the time, like in this case, seems like the miracles are not drawing the people to Wenceslas, but drawing them to Christ himself,
exactly.
um, for sure. So I'm sure with his bones, his relics being there in Prague, he probably became quite central to Bohemian Christianity.
Yeah, and his feast day is also September 28th, which
Oh,
became a
okay.
big celebration. Kings invoked his legacy to legitimize their own rule. Pilgrims came to his shrine, and his image became woven into the identity of Bohemia. He was seen as a just ruler and a protector and saint who embodied the Christian calling to live out the gospel in public life.
Okay, September 28th. That's not Christmas.
Nope.
Why do we sing a Christmas carol about good King Wenceslas?
So that's
What's
a
what's going on?
interesting story there. Um,
Yeah.
'Cause as I was reading, I'm like, "Why is this guy associated with Christmas?" So,
Yeah.
the carol isn't medieval.
Oh,
It was
okay.
written in 1853 by,
Okay.
if I recall, John Mason Neale. He was an English hymn writer, and he took the
Sure.
melody of a 13th century spring carol called Tempus Addis Floridum
Oh, the
and set
spring carols?
yeah,
Huh.
apparently, I learned that too. Um,
Okay.
I've never looked up carols as a concept before this.
I've never really thought of them outside of
Yeah.
Christmas.
So he took that and he
Okay.
set some new words to it and retold the legend of Wenceslas going out on the feast of Stephen, December
Huh.
26th, to bring alms to a poor man. The hymn pictures him trudging through the snow with his page behind him, carrying food and firewood to the needy. So,
Huh.
yeah,
That's kinda crazy. So, it talks about that the first line, "Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen."
yeah.
What
So that
and
feast
that
is key
yeah.
here.
Yeah,
The
that's
The
mhm.
feast of Saint Stephen is the day after Christmas, obviously,
Okay,
and, Stephen in Acts 7 is the
right.
first Christian martyr, stoned because he confessed Christ. So think about the theology here, vaguely here. You celebrate Christ's birth on December 25th, and the very
Yeah.
next day, the church reminds you this baby came into the world not for comfort, but for the cross, and following him
Hmm.
will cost you. And that's why Neil set Wenceslas's act of charity on that day. It's a reminder that true Christmas joy leads to sacrificial love.
That's pretty deep right there. I
Yeah,
mean,
like
so
I never thought about that until I started looking
it's
into it.
teaching through song, teaching through art. It's a catechesis in itself, you
Yeah,
could say, really.
yeah,
Huh.
and yeah, it teaches us. It says if you've celebrated Christmas, then go and live Christmas. Feed the hungry, clothe the poor, embody Christ's love. And Wenceslas's page even says, I can't go on. It's too cold. And Wenceslas's answers follow in my footsteps. That's discipleship there. It echoes in First Corinthians, where Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. Wenceslas is shown as a saint whose example points us straight to Christ here.
Okay, wow. I didn't even know, like, that's kinda crazy, like, I don't sing that carol very often because I mean, it's I
Yeah,
get tripped over the name, but to think that it's actually, like, there's a lot of meaning, packed into that, so we're not just seeing this I mean, a quaint winter scene or, like, and it's not just like, "Oh, yeah, that's a Christmas carol." I don't know anything that's going on in that song, but it is a Christmas carol. We're actually talking about a Christian mentor, discipling his we're proclaiming what discipleship really looks like, I think. That's what I'm trying to get at there.
yeah, and that's why,
Huh.
why I think it's endured. It captures something essential. Christianity is not just about believing in Christ, it's about following him into the world, especially into the
Mm,
cold places where people are suffering. And Wenceslas is remembered for doing just that.
that's awesome. So, let me ask you this. Why should Protestants even care about this random medieval Catholic saint that had a carol written about him?
Well, aside from the carol being quite catchy and festive,
That's true.
um, I do really enjoy that carol.
It's stuck
Um,
in my head right now.
So I think the answer would be that Wenceslas is part of our shared Christian heritage.
That's
We
true,
don't
yeah.
have to adopt every medieval practice around relics or prayers to saints to learn from his witness. Uh,
Yeah.
what we can affirm is his charity, his courage, and his faithfulness unto death. It's like Daniel serving faithfully in Babylon, or like
Mhm.
Joseph in Egypt, men who led in public life without compromising their devotion to God. And in that sense, Wenceslaus is an example for all of us, Catholic, Protestant, y-
Orthodox, they're
yeah,
out there too.
good
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, alright, so, and as this season of Advent and Christmas starts to come to a close, Christ's life reminds us that the Incarnation changes how we live.
Absolutely. And Christ came not to be served, but to serve, and Wenceslas followed that path. His story calls us to do the same, to let Christmas reshape us so that we too look out for the poor and speak truth and hold fast to Christ no matter the cost. And
That's
honestly,
yeah.
like ta looking into Wenceslas, you can almost see some interesting almost parallels like with Saint Francis of Assisi,
Yeah,
born
I
rich,
was I was thinking
gave up
about
his
them.
riches, and devoted his life to helping the poor and the needy and
Mm,
devoting his life to the people. Whereas Wenceslas, he didn't give up his upbringing. He
uh-huh.
harnessed it to continue helping those as well. So it's interesting seeing those two saints, how they accomplished the same thing for Christ with those almost opposite, like, ways to accomplish it, giving up everything or using what God let you be born
Mm,
into to help
yeah.
others.
Yeah, he calls us, into he calls everybody for a little different, everybody goes down a little different path in life.
Yeah.
Some of us very different from others, but ultimately it's all modeling at least some aspect of Christ,
Exactly.
whether it's his leadership and his authority, and being good with that, or his giving up all things and not having a place for his head to rest on, he doesn't have a home. Um, and there's all sorts of ways, and I think God gives us that opportunity in our lifetime, to model some aspect because we're not Jesus, and no one thing really defines everything about Jesus or one way of life. And so I think
Definitely.
it's really
Yeah.
good. So, well, I think this has been a good, fun conversation, and I think it's time we close this chapter on a fresh ground theology being one of the last ones this year. So we look forward to next season as we get into the spirit as person, and really looking forward to discussing that and talking about the different aspects. Of course, we'll get into gifts of the spirit, a little bit of spiritual warfare as well. But For today, friends, thanks for joining us for Fresh Ground Theology. And as you hear carols this season, remember the stories they tell, not just the tunes, not just the way they make you feel, but even the theology that's being taught in that song.
Yes.
And may the example of Saint Wenceslaus draw you closer to Christ, the true King. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
if
mhm.
you want to pause and sincerely thank you to the listeners, real quick, for taking the time to join us here at Fresh Ground Theology. Whether you're on your morning commute, sneaking in to listen between classes, or sipping that last lukewarm cup of coffee at the end of the day, we don't take it for granted. So, if you've enjoyed the episode, we'd love for you to like, share, and subscribe. It helps others discover the show and join the conversation. And you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and more. And now,
We have a merch
we
store.
oh yeah, our merch
We
store. Buy our
we have one of
merch.
the buy our merch. I
Coffee
mean,
cups with
like
our logo. You
I have one yacht and David's working on his second yacht. So I mean, the more merch you buy, the more we're able to kick back and relax around the world. So and
Joking
that is
aside, I think right now it would be nice if I made enough money off of this to buy a Hot Wheel. But
yeah.
I have not even gotten to that.
yeah.
I'm in the
Yeah,
negative
because
here, guys. Buy our merch. Anyways, so now we want to
oh man.
close by turning our attention to the Lord in prayer and a blessing. So, Nate, would you like to lead us in the Lord's Prayer?
Absolutely. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Thanks again, and a Happy New Year. The introduction music in this episode is What Child Is This? Dark Piano Version by Micah, based on the traditional English folk song Greensleeves, used by permission under royalty-free license. You can find more of Micah's music on Spotify and Bandcamp.